Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you guys are listening to us on. As always, thank you guys so much for the support, the kind messages, the questions, the comments, all the things that you've sent the show's way. I really do appreciate it as we're hitting the 3.5-year mark on this, that you guys are still with it and keep communicating with me and leaving all the kind messages and the reviews and the support that you've sent. It really does keep me going, and really excited to be bringing this episode to you. And as I was talking to my guest before we started recording, I think that this topic is just so important because of the way the game is really played now. As many of you have listened know that I've had guests talk about offenses where there's a lot of decision making, and things like dribble drive, read and react, things of that nature, and even things on the defensive end that involve a lot of decision making as well. It's really the way that the game has evolved and the way that the game is going, and so I'm excited to talk about this concept of training players and working with players so that they're developing that basketball IQ, seeing all the options on the floor and making smarter decisions when they're on the court. So that's what we're going to get into today. And of course, I never do this alone. I'm very happy to be joined by the head women's basketball coach at Mount Aloysius College. Coach Brian Giesler is joining us today. Coach, really appreciate you. I know you're a busy man here, but thank you for spending some time coming on to talk to us. How are things going?
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Things are going very well. Early start to the season. Just get a chance to go on Thanksgiving break now. So it's a good spot for us, and very, very, very happy with where we're at going into break. So yeah, things are going well.
As we talked about, I know that it's been a good start to the season so far. So as we joked about, having a little more pep in your step. So I'm glad I'm catching you here on a good mood here as well. But let's start with your journey, Coach, and the journey that you've gone on personally with basketball. Where's the game of basketball taken you, and where's your coaching journey taken you, and how'd you end up at Mount Aloysius where you're at right now?
So that's it. It's an interesting story. Nothing too crazy in there, but I mean, basketball has always been kind of a part of my life, and being a college coach has always been something that's been kind of the end goal. And back from I grew up watching the Carolina teams with Roy Williams and that group, and so that was kind of always like that's where I wanted to be. So as got older and started to see and get some opportunities as a player, it allowed me to kind of see what else was out there, and I ended up going to Grove City College, where I played basketball and golf, which was about 5 minutes from my house, which was never planned. But it took me there, played for a coach there, who has been there for 25 years. And I don't think anybody, maybe not 25, but close. And he's somebody that, I've never heard a bad word said about him. And made a big impact on me with that because, I was kind of shown how you can handle things and really treat your players well, and with respect, and yes, be hard on them, but I can tell you he is one of my best friends to this day. Talk to him regularly, and has been a mentor, a friend, and someone I really look up to. And so as I was going through that, got a chance to play there and have a great experience on the playing side. Still knew I wanted to coach, and when I finished up, he kind of was guiding me through some stuff, and I'd made some connections while I was playing, and hadn't been real sure where I was going to go. And the men's basketball coach at Mount Aloysius at the time, I had run into him coaching AAU, and I had been doing that because, again, knew that's what I wanted to do. And he gave me a call in about mid-October, about a week before the season started that next fall, because I wasn't sure where I was going. and said, "Hey, I have a graduate assistant position available. If you don't take it, I'm probably doing it by myself. So, um, are you interested?" And so I went, met with them, and it was only about 2 hours from home. So, it gave me a chance to coach. I was the only assistant on staff, so got a chance to get in there a little bit more than most GAs do. And it was a good fit. Got my master's with it, so I went ahead and went for it. And then after that 2 years, he actually left, and another coach came in, who I for whatever reason made a good impression on after the first day, and he kept me on, as an assistant with the men's program, and very, very different styles from the first men's coach I worked for. So that was, both good, bad, all the different things, were it was a great experience. He taught me so much in a year, and then he's still in coaching, and did a great job with the men's program while I was here. But through that year, then at the end of the year, I think I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods at the time, and I got a text from the AD and was like, "Hey, are the women's jobs now open? Are you interested?" And I mean, what 25-year-old, coach is like, "No, I don't want to be a head coach."
Yeah.
And so we kind of talked about it, and it was a bumpy ride at first, but went ahead and did that, and started that year with 7 kids, so somehow made it through without any major injuries, and that's it's given me a lot of opportunities that, and I always said I was someone that I would have been fine on the men's side or the women's side, didn't bother me. Still doesn't. I love where I'm at now, so I can't, like, the players I've had have been great. Made really good relationships with people in other coaching positions, and it's been I haven't made a lot of stops, but I've made some transitions in where I've been, and obviously played and coached with some different people. So, it's allowed me to kind of go to, where I am now. And some of it has been very difficult, which, is it sucked at the time, but I can tell you especially this summer, I remember having, one of those, like, almost come to Jesus type moments of, like, what, if you want to do this, I got to do it. So, just kind of buckle down and say, okay, what do I got to do differently to make this work? But I've had some great mentors, and each one of them has just kind of reinforced the fact that this is what I've always wanted to do. To become a head coach at 25, and
it's incredible.
and still be doing this, it's kind of it's kind of surreal, but it's also very, very rewarding. Love the relationships I get to have with the players. Love the relationships I get to have with our coaching staff here in general, and just in the friends I've made through the journey. It's been pretty special.
That's and I just trying to imagine being a head high school coach at 25, which I wasn't, let alone college. I mean, that's an incredible story too, and especially going from the men's to the women's side, just having that transition when you think of you're on one path and then something else opens up and you're going to something that it's still basketball, but it is different. So yeah, no, that's incredible.
Yeah, that was I think again, it wasn't hard from the basketball perspective. Like, yes, there's differences, but like you said, it is basketball, so a lot of that was pretty similar. But a little bit of relationship wise, just very different of how they think and how you have to approach things. And then recruiting was a complete, none of your contacts are relevant anymore, so you got to do all that stuff over again, and then just learning, because none of us. Some people say, like, well, were you ready? No, I wasn't ready. I mean, none of us
who would be
get that. We get that opportunity, whether it had been 10 years from now and I'm 40 and I'm still not ready, but learning on a fly took some time, but
sure.
it's still been a great experience.
Coach, let me ask you about things on the defensive end, and I know that that's
Mhm,
something that that you and I briefly talked about before we started recording and interactions that we have. And one of the things
mhm.
you mentioned to me is how you took ideas from other coaches, and I'm always curious to ask about what not only what ideas did you take, but also how did you decide which ones you wanted to use and which ones maybe weren't going to work for you?
Well, I think I'll start with the how I took ideas and kind
Hmm.
of what ideas. I the coach I played for is very defensive oriented. I think I remember my sophomore year we tried to press a little bit, and by the time we gave up like one or two layups, he was like, "Nope, we can't press. We're done." We were a half court man, like pack line style team, and then that's what I got to playing for 4 years. So that was a big impact on me in terms of like that's just how I understood and learned the game. Um, especially at the college level. Then the other coaches I've talked to and worked with. I've worked for coaches that coach that pressed, and was more of a full court kind of system style um, defensively. Then I worked for another one who was very, very half court oriented again. Um, and I think it's, uh, so he was a mixture of man zone. Um, so being with the coaches I've been with, I've had only man ever. I've had the mostly pressing, a little bit half, but we want to try and trap. We want to do those things. And then I had another one who was, a half court oriented, but he was going to try some different things. Um, and I think, you know, understanding from my end that all of them can be valuable, I think is the first thing. You can't really get away from, well, I don't want to press. Okay,
Hmm.
that's fine. But at some point you might need it for one. And number two, depending on personnel, I think is also where you kind of have to be, what you want to do. Because sometimes you might be thinking, okay, we're going to press, but personnel just doesn't work, or
Yeah.
the group's struggling to get the concept. Um, and so I think it's all about too what you're comfortable with. Um, Having played and coached under more defensive oriented people that had a similar approach to it, I think that's kind of where I tend to gravitate towards. I know most of what we do is not necessarily, it's not pack line,
Okay.
um, but it's also like what we force baseline, because I again, that's my personal belief is like we've got to be able to rotate to the baseline and allowing them to the pass we're going to give up is the long skip pass. So both man and zone for me, that's where we tend to gravitate towards. Um, but I think a lot of it has to do with just being able for me to make it easy for the players to understand. And similar when we get into offensive stuff, but with ours with because we right now we have a like a 3-2 zone and our man. Well, in general, the rotations are all the same. We're not necessarily changing our defensive philosophies because of, oh, we're in zone now. Like we're still trying to cut off gaps. We're still trying to do the things that
Hmm.
allow it to force baseline, and then our rotations are the same. The only difference is now you're just rotating from the same spot instead of where your man is. Um, and I think it's just trying to find your ideas in, there's always a positive in anything with a 2-3 zone, a 3-2 zone, 1-3-1, man to man pressure, more soft. You got to be confident in what you're trying to do, but you also can't be too set in your ways to say, okay, we're not gonna, even though it's not working, um, trying to adjust to it. And we've done some other things in the past that, like, right now I've got a pretty young group. I'm not sure we're quite ready to try yet.
Yeah, I've been
We'll
there.
at some point we'll probably start switching things. In terms of our man, we'll switch screens or interchanges. We actually did a moment the other day in a game where we switched 1 through 4 and left the 5, which is a good matchup for us. So we switched everything else. One of the coaches I worked for, he actually, which again, we're not ready to do it yet, but we had started to try and change defenses in the middle of a shot clock, which is
I've seen that before. Yeah.
It's extremely difficult, especially because there's so many different ways you can do it, and there's a couple ways to get burnt on it. But if you can do it and do it a couple times, it causes some real problems offensively. So, I think just being adaptable is allowing you to take some of those other ideas. And an opposing coach one time I actually stole a 2-3 trap, where we kind of sit back out of a timeout, and when they cross half court, we just kind of send the whole group at them. And I probably used it about 20 times the whole year, but if you get 6 or 7 turnovers on it, it's pretty successful.
Yeah. It's just something you can put in there and change things up with.
Yeah. And actually we ran it the other day, and we haven't practiced it once.
Really?
And got turned, because I don't want to waste too much time in practice when in 5 games so far, I've used it 1 time. So
right.
It's not really one of those things.
Focal point. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's going to backfire. But you know what? That time it did. So, it's something we just got to continue to. But, I like the idea of just switching it up for that piece for possession. So that's like that's a really good example of, an idea that I'm not really even sold on as a whole, but for 1 to 2 or 3 possessions, maybe, I loved it. And so we've kind of used that a few times the past couple of years. And so I think it's just being open to, really anything, and just trying to see what you like and being ready to adjust to, the personnel you have.
Yeah. And I think that's always, to the point that you made, is always kind of like the trick is your coaching philosophy and the things that you believe in and the things that work, versus balancing like who you actually have as your personnel, and making sure that you're not too rigid or too stuck in one philosophy, that you can maximize the strength of the players that you have. And I know even for me now, that's still sometimes a challenge, because I have my own beliefs and my own philosophies of what I want to see and what I believe can work, but sometimes the players aren't there that are going to make it necessarily work, and I got to do things a little bit different to maximize those strengths.
Right. And it's something that, again, if you can be confident in however you try and do it, I think then, you kind of have an unlimited amount of options at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Coach, let's shift a little bit now on the offensive end. And I want to talk about offense and offensive philosophy. And so let's kind of talk about your offensive philosophy, and where does player decision making come into play with what you like to do on the offensive end?
So mine is a little bit, it's offensively we're kind of a mosh pit of things, but most of what we do is dribble drive based, with some tweaks, but I think for one it has fit our personnel the last couple of years, but it's also, I think it's simple to run when you get the personnel with it, because most of what we talk about are looking at the defensive end. So it's more about getting an advantage, and then being able to read the defense and figure out where it came from. So it's not really. It sounds really simple when I say it that way, but in general, that's what it is. Because I think, especially at the college level, when you get into sets, I have some sets I like. I don't like running a lot of them because teams can scout and do those things. Not that they don't do it at the high school level, but they do it at a even higher rate.
Absolutely,
and the last thing I want is our players to go out there and be like confused or trying to figure out, well, coach, like I couldn't make that next pass. What do I do now? So being able to see the options out of it, and allowing the defense to kind of somewhat dictate what we're going to do, but understanding that when they do a certain thing, that's where we're going to go to. So for us in the dribble drive, most of it is trying to get that first advantage. And there's a couple different entries into it that, for us is, those are more of like our calls, I guess, is getting us into an entry. And then starting to attack from there. And then once you get an advantage, the idea is someone is going to help one way or the other. If you've got an advantage, someone is going to help. So you're just reading, okay, most of the time, if it's driving from the top towards the one side, it's probably the wing defender. If it's the wing defender, then your read is where are they at in terms of the ball and who they're guarding. Are they out denying it? Okay, then you're either going to have more of an open lane, or if not, you're going to have a backdoor option. So you've got to try and engage that defender. If it's not that defender, you get more towards the rim, it's probably the big sliding over. So then you've got to decide, okay, do I get the whole way to the rim and finish, or do I make that dump to the big? And if it's that defender, then you've also got to read the backside defender to see if they're coming down. So are they taking away the big, or are they giving you the opposite wing option? But it's really a quick read of, okay, you have your wing defender. Where are they at? Can I get past them or not? And then it's the big defender. And again, simple reads of finish or dump. Then the backside defender, is it the dump, or is it the come to a jump stop and skip it? And really, explaining that, it's, again, I think it's a simple explanation for a lot of things going on there. But most of the time, you're going to win with the players. So a lot of times giving them that freedom to, just make a read. And being able to put shooters out there, then, okay, great, you get a kick out. Now you're just attacking another closeout, which where that you try to go middle, but most of the time just trying to attack that closeout and making the defense, panic and start to run around and try and cover everything and recover the whole possession. Most of the time we get one good or one bad closeout, but for a good drive, most of the time after that, we're going to get a good shot. It's just a matter of, is it first, second, third pass? So I think a lot of our offensive stuff is basically around, when the defense does something, here's your counter.
And when players come to you, what is their level of making those reads? And I guess what I'm furthermore asking is what needs to go into teaching that player off the dribble to improve their vision, improve their decision making, and be able to be quicker with those decisions?
I get all ranges, to put it simply. Lots of different reasons for that. Some of them are, high school programs they came from. Some of it are, the dribble drive, the way we try and run it is somewhat counterintuitive to most motion offenses, because there's a lot of giving space instead of trying to fill up. Most kids are taught that, when that ball goes to the other side, okay, I got to get to the top to fill that space. When most of ours are, no, stay away and give them more space to drive, because that's where your opening is. But it's a wide range of things. There's a lot of, I would say, mixture of, understanding of that. A little bit of, I've got some kids who just aren't great when, seeing that next defender. They might see the first one, but they might not see the next one. I've got some who, and again, this is a general, some that just, they aren't great at reading and making that first simple read, where it's kind of like they're trying to overthink it. When in all reality, it's 1 to 2 choices. So I think they're trying to, write an essay on a test rather than like, it's like a true or false question. It's as an example of that. So I think for us, most of the time is we start out with a couple different things. like if I'm putting it in, I'm showing them spacing and giving them general ideas of what we're trying to do. So, we have our 6 spots on the floor, and I'm like, you want to try and drive double and triple gaps. So if someone's next to you, that's not a place to drive it. You want to drive the opposite way. And so we'll try and do it. We'll start it. I'm still a believer in a kind of whole part whole idea. So we'll put the whole thing in and kind of let it go for a day or two of where it's not pretty, as kids are trying to learn, and then I'll kind of start breaking it down. So a lot of what we try and do is building it up with one-on-ones even. We use a drill called blind one-on-one, where the defender's in front of the ball handler with their back to them, and the offensive player puts the ball in their back, and the defense can't move until the ball is taken off their back. And the general idea of it is we're trying to work on finishing one-on-one. So you've got an advantage, you've got the defense on your hip. And so now you're just trying to figure out, okay, where can I finish? But we've added that to 2-on-2, and some of our 2-on-2 looks, we'll give them different, and all of it's out of our offensive, like, basic spacing rules. So everything is, allowing them to put themselves in a game type situation, whether it's starting 1-on-1, 2-on-2, we'll do 3-on-3. If some of the dribble drive stuff, there's the blood drills. We use a lot of that. I'll put kids in. We use an advantage drill, so it's a 4-on-4, but the defense has to start on the side of them, so you've already gotten them beat. So now it's just a matter of reading, okay, where's the help coming from? What's your next pass? And for us, it's also a good defensive drill because someone just got beat. So now we've got to try and rotate. And I think from that, for us, it's just continuing to, give them opportunities, in much more live, examples, and trying to get them to see, okay, where's my decision at? And when that happens, what should I see? And I think it's easier for them to go, if they're worried about one defender first, so starting 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, like, they don't have to worry about the other 2 or 3 defenders on the floor. So they're able to kind of see it visually in that sense first. And then you add one, and it gets a little tighter. But trying to build that for them, I think is kind of how we've and it's not always pretty at first, but as we start to get it, then it becomes where it's very difficult to guard if you've got 1 or 2 kids that really understand it and can see it. And then after that, you can put some kids on the floor who, and again, not in a bad way, just they don't have to try and make that many decisions. They just got to figure out, do I shoot it or do I make a drive? And so you can kind of let kids play to their strengths with that, as long as they understand the general, the basic ideas of it.
And so what I am kind of gathering from your answer is that you are intentional in terms of your practices and the way that you design practices and the things that you want to do to consistently be working on players making decisions and putting them in situations where they have to adjust and read to what's going on and make decisions consistently throughout practice.
Yes. And it's been a little bit of feedback I've gotten, but it's also been just something that, you got to get them out and playing, whether it's, the full 5-on-5 or whether it's small sided games. But, by what I've tried to do with it is, the 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 is, starting it out with a game like simulation so that they can, get that rep over and over and over. And so, so being intentional with it and then trying to keep it as simple as possible, not really try and give them, again, dribble drive. There's all kinds of, the true dribble drive. It's there's a lot more, okay, the drop zone, and we've eliminated that. So just being able to go and read that one defender, or 2 defend, like almost a football style of like check downs of like, okay, you check that one, you check that one, you check that one. And being able to, continually rep that. And by giving them, okay, here's your first look, here's your decision. Okay, now we're adding another one. Now you got 2 decisions. Now you got 3 decisions. So being intentional and putting them in as many game-like situations as possible, as trying to shelter them a little bit from a game, but still allow them to see those actions, so they don't get into the game and freeze and try and overthink it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the best way probably to go about improving that decision making is the only way I guess they can improve on it is if they're in a position where they have to consistently make decisions. And I know that I've had struggles with players and in the past, and I'm sure you've had these experiences as well, especially with ball handlers, about when to make the decision to go to the basket, or when to pass, when to get players involved, when to maybe not be seen as selfish versus like, hey, you have to take this opportunity when you see it.
Right.
I know that this is something that I've seen players struggle with, and I'm sure for that player with the ball in their hand consistently, your ball handler, to be able to not just make the right decision, but also understand that sometimes making the right decision means like that they're taking they're taking the ball in their own hands and going to the basket, or trying to make a move. I know it can be kind of stressful for players when they feel that they have that much responsibility. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've had to communicate and talk to your primary ball handlers about.
Oh, definitely. It's something that certain kids and certain players can understand it differently. Again, based on what they've been. Scorers tend to have an idea of like, okay, I can get to the rim, so I'm going to get to the rim. Where some that have never really been put in that situation, are kind of hesitant to even really drive it, or they're driving it with the intention to pass it, when really they're like, it's 1 to 2 dribbles, maybe more, to a layup, but they're not super comfortable with it. They're not,
Mhm.
So it's one of those things. It's all different. I think the biggest fight, and not fight, but you know what I try to get through to our kids is like, there's too many times you got to be able to play off 2 feet, and most kids are not really taught how to do that. So I think that's probably that's one of the bigger adjustments I'm trying to get kids to do. They play off 1 foot and they try and jump passes, or trying to make a pass on a move, and and then with freshmen right now, I'm dealing with well, yeah, now that all of a sudden the defenders, they're a lot quicker. So is that one guarding the first pass. So you've got to make that decision quicker, and if you make a pass that's not quite accurate, now all of a sudden you're making a turnover. So trying to get kids, like, that's one of those things that I harp on, that when you can play off 2 feet, some of those decisions become a little bit easier because it does slow you down naturally. And I think one of the issues with the dribble drive, but it's also a good thing, you have to play so fast sometimes, because you think, okay, I got dribble, and they try to go so fast that a lot of times those decisions aren't necessarily coming the way they're supposed to.
Mhm.
So we talk about playing off 2 feet, because now you have a chance to make some of those decisions that you might not have otherwise. And just general slowing down. They move at a high pace. You can slow it down way more than you think you can, but as you get more reps with it, it does naturally kind of slow down. So it's a double-edged sword with that. But I know it's something that trying to get kids to understand. Again, if they're not scores, like, you got to take that option outside. They didn't help over as much as you thought they did. You got to be able to take that layup. And so it's definitely about building confidence. We've done a lot more this year too, of trying to do some ball handling drills before practice. As part of practice, to try and continue to add some confidence to them that way, because they're all on different levels there. And I think those are just continuing to emphasize the couple things that you need to be able to do, and showing kids that hey, you have plenty of options now that we've got some people that can drive it. You can be a little bit more of a shooter, But if someone closes out on you badly, you got to be able to put the ball on the floor once or twice.
Yeah, and I know that for and I don't know, I'm sure this is at all levels, and I'm thinking, of the situation. I'm kind of like playing your offense in my head right now, and I'm
Uh-huh.
imagining that kick out here, and I can see, some of my players, right, who when they don't have the ball, they're the shooters. They get the ball and they
Right.
they're in that in between, like, oh, I don't know if that closeout's going to be there or not. It might be
Right.
there, and then they just sort of freeze, and then it's like you
Hmm.
didn't do anything. You didn't make a choice, and now the ball's stuck
Yep.
corner or whatever because you didn't put the ball on the floor, you didn't swing it, you didn't shoot, you were kind of in that in between zone, and I think that building of confidence for players when they get the ball in their hand, when it gets kicked out to them, to be able to quickly assess and quickly make a decision and just be kind of confident in their decision. I know for me as a coach, one of the
Yeah.
things I had to work on was building those players' confidence where when that ball gets kicked out to you, I am trusting you that you are have put in enough shots that you know that you're ready to shoot or you're ready to assess a bad closeout and just be decisive and confident. And it's something that I don't think I knew really to do when I first started coaching, but I realize kind
Hmm.
of now how important that is to build that confidence to let your players make those decisions when that ball gets kicked to them, for example.
Yeah. And I think that's been, again, you get it sometimes with better players, but you got to have some of those kids that they have a whether it's a shooter or because shooters, and I can say this from experience, like I didn't want to put the ball on the floor very often as a player because I was a shooter, and bad things happen when I put the ball on the floor too often. So I tried to, I could do it once or twice, but it was something that I had so you kind of try to play to those strengths, but then you start to give them, okay, showing them film, I think is a big piece of that too, to show them like, okay, you can do it. um we do another drill, we do two different ones with it, but we have a one more drill, which is a shooting drill that it's a simple one to start practice with, but we get two shooters on the wing and we have someone closing out and they're making a pass, but they're not necessarily closing out the person they made the pass to. So even just a simple like read of, okay, I have to pick, are they close? If they're closing me out, I have to make the next pass. But if they're closing the other person out, then I got to be ready to shoot it. And you know, allowing them opportunities like that, even in just a simple, we do it for 3 minutes, even a simple shooting drill like that, just allows them to rep those, and so they get a little bit more confident in making those right decisions. And we do another one with, you know, whether the defense, closed out the whole way, or did they close out short? So should you put the ball on the floor, or should you just straight shoot it? And again, there's shooting drills that are simple enough to basically have 2 to 3 minutes, but allowing those kids like that all I have to do is think about one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then even if it's 1 to 2 dribbles and pull up, awesome. That's a good look. It's a great option. And just giving them continual times to try and rep that and see what it looks like, maybe at a little slower speed than in the game, but by making that decision for again 2 to 3 minutes, like now when they get in there, it's a little bit more of a comfort level.
And just to add on to that, because I completely agree with what you're saying. I know that the other thing to that as well for me in decisions like that, or situations in practice where we have things like that where players got to, maybe they do a couple dribbles and pull up, telling my players that even if they miss, like you still better be taking that, like they
Yeah.
don't lose confidence in that decision just because you didn't see a couple go in. Like you got to keep shooting. If you're a shooter, you got to keep shooting. And because once you stop shooting, then we're in even worse trouble, because then you're making the absolute wrong decision at that point.
Well, and I think and I think you hit it right. Like you got to have some confidence and a little bit of freedom to say like, okay, you can make a mistake. You maybe you took one that was contested, and we can look back on film and go like, okay, was that a great shot? And like, no. Okay, but now you've seen it. You saw what that looked like in the game. Like, I still want you to shoot it when you're open, but now that's where we can start talking about it. And I think the same thing for even times that we're trying different passes, or understanding that if you throw a backdoor pass and maybe you throw it out of bounds, I'm okay with that. I mean, I'd rather you didn't throw it out of bounds, but the ability and the confidence to make the pass, you got to have that first. If you're worried about me getting mad at you because you turned the ball over, that's not where I'm going to be more mad at you if you're scared to make any decision. So allowing them some freedom, and again, where the dribble drive focuses, like I prefer them to drive middle most of the time, and some of the baseline drives that we get, they do get an earful, but a lot of it is, again, I'm telling you to read the defense. So they may close out on you differently than I thought they would. So you've got to be able to make a decision and go with it. So you know what, if we make one and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it works out and it's in the general guidelines of the offense, I have no problem with that. And you got to be able to make a decision as a player and have that freedom to do that, because then you start to get even more confidence to make the simple ones that you do regularly. And so I think that's where, continuing to show them, okay, here's what you could have done differently. Not that that was wrong, but here, as we go through, I'm telling kids all the time, like, okay, that one worked, but did you see this defender and why that person was also open?
Yeah.
And they start to go, okay. And that's where, with us, we just continue to, try and show as many things as we can. When we go into scout stuff, we try and, give them an idea of what you're going to see defensively when we do certain things. And that way, like if it's a team, we have to look more on the backside or the opposite side of the floor. Okay. But if it's more of a pack line where it's attack the gap and just a normal kick out, and those, so giving them more confidence of like, okay, this is what the defense is going to do. And being able to have some freedom that if they do something different, you still can go do that.
It's the idea, right, of if we're going to put in an offense that allows for player decision making, then players need to be able to make decisions. And we have to understand that there might not be the decisions we think they're going to make, but if it's around decision making, we got to let them make decisions. And if we don't want to make them have to make many decisions, then our offense should be a lot more rigid and a lot more set based to take that away from them. So it's like,
Correct.
Can't get too mad at them for making, wrong decisions sometimes if if it's all predicated on making decisions, like mistakes are going to happen.
Correct.
Sort of thing,
Correct.
right?
We could run some flex and give you, two options and say that there you go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's again, from my experience as a player too, I think it's more fun to play that way. You got to play with some freedom.
Yes. Yeah. Players like it a lot more, and
players like it a lot more
energy.
As a coach, it's not always the easiest thing to give them that much freedom, but at some points you got to say, you know what, that you got to let them play. And that's it. That's at least I've hopefully prepared them enough that when they go play, they're going to make the right one. So I can live with that.
Yeah, 100%. We kind of talked about it a little, but I want to make sure I kind of ask it specifically about, in your experience as a coach, what are barriers that you have seen that get in the way of players developing good court vision and seeing the whole floor, whether it's with the ball or off ball, and how have you kind of designed things in a way to kind of help them kind of push past those obstacles and kind of reach those breakthroughs?
I think it's barriers are, that's a tough one because they're all over the place.
Sure.
Some kids are, some of them it is skill level. And I think that's just whether it's not being able to dribble with their head up. As dumb as that may sound, it happens.
I see it all the time.
Ability to dribble with both hands. I think that's, for me, that's a major barrier. And some of these aren't necessarily going to fix it, but I think a basketball IQ a lot of times is a barrier to it. And you can teach some of that and grow that IQ, but some of it is just, whether they have the ability to do it or not. And I think for that, I think those are probably the two biggest barriers. And I touched on a smaller one earlier, that where our dribble drive is, it's counterproductive or counterintuitive to what most motion offenses are. So that also is somewhat, you've had these, you've had your typical ways you've done things forever, your habits that you've created. And now all of a sudden I'm kind of stripping that for a minute to say, like, okay, even though I know you want to go that way, you need to stay here for a minute. And while that's happening, I think it's very difficult sometimes because, it doesn't look pretty when we run the offense, or because people are doing all kinds of different things. And granted, I have a whole new team this year, so I saw it even more than normal. But, being able to do that, I think it's, continuing to, and like we've talked about, adding and giving them pieces to show, continue to add to their decision makings, and allow them opportunities to see pieces of the floor before they see the whole thing. And then honestly, we'll break some stuff down. We had a really good day the other day in practice where we went 5-on-5, and I don't know that we played more than 2 to 3 minutes in a 10-minute segment, but we kept talking about, okay, when there's a drive here, this is where the defense is going to probably go, and then allowing them to kind of see it in slow-mo, so that when they see it in full speed, it's a little bit of being able to kind of anticipate, here's what's going to happen. And wow, that's not always perfect. It allows them to kind of start to see the whole court in a way where, okay, when I'm driving, instead of thinking in terms of, I use the term blinders, instead of having blinders on, like, now you're able to see it in a setting that allows you to see it fully, because then when you get onto the floor in a game, you've seen it and can think now quicker to where, okay, now I got to look to that backside because of the defense. So I think it's trying to get kids, pushing past the obstacles, just giving them more, it's going to sound like a broken record, giving them more opportunities. But also being able to go through, film. And, I think film is super helpful at every level of being able to see, oh, that's what you meant. And like, you see that light bulb.
You see it. Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. And now all of a sudden it's in their mind of like, I get what he means. Okay. Then it's a couple more times like, okay, now it's like, it's in the back of their mind a lot more. And then when you see it 1 or 2 times and you get it done, it's like, the light bulb moment. And I think for me, again, just, continuing to talk about that confidence with them, and, making sure that positive reinforcement's there. So, when it's there, be overly excited that, we're able to see it. And I can sometimes be sarcastic, which my girls do understand, at least for the most part. So I can kind of start talking about some of those things, or something that, one of them doesn't do great, and kind of like joke with them about it, but it continues to kind of reinforce what we're looking for. And then when they do it, it's like, it's the biggest deal that they, did what we're looking for. And so it just continues to be like, okay, I did the right thing. And I think it's the whole idea is continuing to give them reps that, it's just like in a classroom with, simple math, trying to give them more and more reps that, like, then you start to get quicker, you start to see patterns, you start to see all those things. And then, by the time they're, 2 or 3 years down the line, all of a sudden they have all this stuff in their mind and they're really, really good at it. And just continuing to reinforce that, when they do it well, that's what they should be doing.
I really like to I mean, you said so many really great things, but like the filming part in film has saved me, I know, so much, like, energy maybe, or time, because we could just, we don't have to have these discussions of players about what we did or what we didn't do. It's like, all right, well, we'll look at it, and the answer will become obvious right there, and then we can look at it, and we can just kind of go from there, rather than like so much energy, I feel like, and so many conversations have been cut down and shortened just by being able to like look at film and use film productively, that I really, and I know a lot of coaches too who do this too, about even just like filming practices and like going through those things. Like, anything that you could show players, I think is so much. Not that speaking isn't valuable, but just to have that visual, like, this is what you are doing and this is what I'm seeing, and it's like, oh, oh, okay, like we aren't spacing
Yep.
the floor, or we aren't, doing this. Like, no, we aren't. But like we've seen it, so now we know, and now we can move on and hopefully get better at it. And it's
And,
just invaluable to me.
oh, I totally agree. And again, you mentioned, filming practice, and that's something that, I have an assistant who is, part time. She works a full time job, so some days I'm on my own. Um, and even then, I've found ways to, maybe we're doing a half court drill or something. I'm not trying to film the whole practice because truthfully, I don't have time to go through the whole 2 hour practice every day
Yeah.
during when we're scouting and doing all those other things. But I'm able to, maybe it's a 15-minute 10, 15, 20-minute segment. And just, whether it's half court, I was able to set up the camera for us on the one half court, where then every time you're able to just, and we do try and, especially in our half court segments with this stuff, we're trying to go and keep the speed up with it. So, possessions are getting reset pretty quickly. So in a 15-minute segment, I have 10 minutes of solid footage that I can be like, okay, and it's all based on our offensive stuff. So
Hmm.
it allows us to, and I can go the next day and practice and take the first 15 minutes and be like, okay, here's what you need. And it just, even that is like allowing you to reinforce that. So I think it's something that not everybody can necessarily, do or work on. But I think something that I figured out this year was, that ability to, you don't have to film the whole practice. You don't have to have an assistant there. You can do some of that on your own, and being able to, when you have a group that definitely wants to learn, they, even that 10-minute segment, they are thrilled to have it and just have some feedback.
Yeah.
And so, put your iPad, put your phone up there for 10 minutes, film the segment you need to film. I try to get it to them as soon as I can after practice, and then watch, maybe not the whole thing, but 5 minutes of it the next day. And now all of a sudden you have some reinforcement, and they're able to kind of see it, instead of, sometimes just game film is hard, especially when some kids don't play quite as much as others,
Yeah.
where, now all of a sudden your practice film is probably pretty even. So now you're getting everybody, and
Everyone's in
you're
there.
able to
Yeah.
have, and I think even from a general culture standpoint, it also helps, because now all of a sudden you can coach everybody more equally in practice that way, and try and reinforce some things that way. So, everybody's a little bit more invested, than they otherwise would be.
Absolutely. No, I really like that idea too of you do it with practice, you get so much more film on, like you said, players who may not play as much in games. They get so much more time to actually see themselves playing in those game like situations that it's a lot of film for them to actually look at of themselves playing rather than of others playing. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Because film sessions, when you're not playing, get very, very difficult to pay attention to.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and especially like for players when it's just like, yeah, like, but it's not me doing that, or like, okay, but
yep.
like how invested am I? Like, I don't know, like why is coach yelling at me? Like I wasn't playing,
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
like getting on me, yeah, sort of thing for sure. Um, I wanted to ask before we hit our concluding segment, and
Yep.
something I think that you mentioned that I think is really useful in terms of building players' decision making, and I want you to speak a little bit more on that, is what you do in practice in terms of throwing those different defenses at your players that they might be seeing in upcoming opponents. What kind of goes into your practice planning of being intentional with making sure that you're letting those players see those different like defensive looks and making sure that they have like that familiarity of what the defense might do in an upcoming game?
I think a lot of it is, for me, especially, is scout based. You know, especially at this point in the year, like it's definitely way more scout based of, whether teams are. Let's say we just played a team actually that, um, tends to deny on the wings more, so they don't help as much in the gap. Um, so in practice, a combination of things, but we're always going through and giving them, for us, one of the first drills I do after a warm up when there's a team like that, we do Princeton layups. So it's literally just a dribble at backdoor, um, and trying to show really give them no other options than, what we're probably going to see, in terms of, again, scout wise and what I've been able to get from that. But I think, in general, it's giving them, again, more options and more reps, but making it very intentional. And in the Y generation we have, making sure they know what the reason is, where somebody is playing, giving them that information where sometimes it may be too much. And I've been known to do that before, but
Me too.
I think a lot, I think a lot of it is, some of those kids, like, as soon as they understand the concepts behind it, from why we were doing this drill, and from what I've seen, this is what they're going to do, and this is why it will work. All of a sudden, like, things start to just click, and they're like, okay, like, and then you can start to, and don't get me wrong, I've been wrong on scouts before too, so that's kind of backfired. But I think a lot of that is, same things, trying to mix up things in practice with, certain days where, what the coach I played for, he was always, he would mix things up on days with zones. So if we were going to see it early in the season, we didn't do a whole lot of zone stuff, but Saturdays was our zone day.
Okay.
And so I think some of that you can kind of, be able to shift some players' mental ideas with, making sure they know, like, okay, today is focusing on a team that's going to pressure way more. They're going to do these, and it can kind of be scout based, but it can also be, okay, again, early preseason or summer when, if you can work with your team, giving them those opportunities to say, okay, today we're focusing on a team that's going to pressure us, or vice versa. Maybe it's a team that's going to be more pack line or help from the backside, all of those different scenarios, but again, allowing the kids to get reps against it, and not just the one or two times that you're thinking, oh, this might, giving a whole day of where, like, okay, we're going to go over this. And I think I wish I could say more to that, but I think a lot of times it's just being extremely intentional and being creative with how you set up a drill, which it might be something that, we haven't really thought of or done, and then all of a sudden, we're adjusting it to say, okay, but they're not going to help from here. So we've got to make this, in one of our blood drills, a lot of times we go 4-on-4 a ton. And we'll make sure that the defenders know, like, okay, I understand we do it this way, but I need you to make it look this way. And they tend to buy into that a lot easier too. But then just giving us a full, a full segment of, even 10 or 15 minutes, because you can't do everything, but allowing them to say, okay, we're going to do this blood drill with our through cut, and then you're reading this defense this way. And even some of our other stuff that we do offensively, giving them some options to go against it live, and as many times as you can. Like, for example, we also, in addition to the dribble drive, we run a little bit of the Princeton, like a little bit of Princeton action with, the split action on the wing and hitting the high post. Okay. So with that, we do our split action shooting, I call it, and it's, we'll do it 2-on-0 and rep and get all the different looks out of the 2-on-0 action. But then we'll add some other things to it where we'll go 3-on-0 or 3-on-3 with it, 2-on-2 with it, to allow them to just continue, like, okay, now you have to read it. So now you have to make that adjustment to, maybe teams are, I'll tell the defense, okay, now you can switch it. We're going every time you're switching it, so that way we're working on more of the slips. Or we're saying, okay, now they're gonna trail, so you have to be ready to make a curl cut. And just giving them as many ideas of, okay, when they're going to play it this way, this is how you should be reading it, or at least trying to. And I think, it does take some time, especially, high schools and being in Pennsylvania, our high schools are really lucky that they pretty much get all year to spend with all of their players all the time.
That's great. Yeah.
So a little bit luckier with that, but I think a lot of those times I can remember in high school, coach I had, we just went over, the screen actions and understanding, when screens are this way, and, you got to give them a chance to, learn it. And I think some of those things aren't necessarily taught a lot or as they should be, but learn what it is, then learn why it is, and then learn how to do it. And I think all of those things are, kind of in line with what I've been saying for the most part, where it's just continuing to give them reps and allowing them to conceptualize it, practice it, and then get good at it. And I think after that, I try and keep it as simple as I can, that like, then you're on your own as far as reading it. Like, I've given you as many reads as I can. And, but for us, the scout stuff, we'll walk through it a little bit more so they can see it a little bit slower. Cause I don't want to mess up our defense too much, to try and figure out, okay, we do it this way, but I need you to play it this way all the time. I try to avoid that a little bit more. So we'll walk through it more and kind of be like, okay, here's what they're going to look at. Here's how they're going to help. Here's what we need to try and do against it. So that way and then reinforce it, pregame scout, that type of thing. But with practice and everything, it's just continuing to give them, more ideas, whether you're repping it 2-on-0, whether you're repping it 5-on-5, but putting them in situations where you don't want to just roll the ball out, but give them
be intentional. Yeah.
Yes. Be intentional with it. And I continue to say, be creative. Like, you can't be too creative with that type of stuff. Like, yeah, you know what? If it doesn't work, same thing as you're trying to tell them. You got to try and some different things sometimes. And someday this drill is going to be like, nope, that didn't work. And we're never going to do that again. But other times you get some stuff out of it, and you sometimes get a drill that they love all of a sudden. So
it's like working on coaching decision making too, right? We're gonna
you
got to make the right read in practice sometimes on what to do, and sometimes you won't make the right decisions. But that's okay. Yeah.
And I think being intentional with that in practice too. I think it's practice plans are very important to me. Even if I come in with a little note card with what it is, there's never a time that it doesn't have, every drill in there has a reason for it. I've got about 7 or 8 shooting drills that I do pretty early in practice, and they're all kind of adjusted to what we're going to see, whether it's Princeton layups, whether it's kind of our read and react shooting. All of those things are based on, okay, we're going to do this, and this is, but everything down after that is like, we're going with a purpose for that drill, and blood drills, all that stuff. We're going to see more man, we'll do that, those type of things. So I think being intentional with that then allows you to keep your focus too in practice. When I have a little section on my practice plans that, everything that I'm wanting to emphasize something different today, in a certain drill, I always have that down there that, then my assistant, when she's there, and if I have players sitting out, they know what time we're on, they know what we're trying to do. So I think, the being intentional part is huge, both on a coaching side, but like allowing the players to, see that intentionality. And I think it helps them kind of stay focused too when you're that invested.
No, 100% agree. And I was thinking about the part that we just kind of talked about, and I remember I've been in situations where I thought I had this really good idea for something we want to put in a practice, and I was like, this is what we need, and then after I had to apologize, like, ooh, I made the wrong read there. I think I made the wrong decision, that drill or whatever I thought I was going to do. Oh boy, that's on me. We'll fix that and do something better and more meaningful next time.
Yep, and I've had to do that too, and even then, that just that a bit, like allowing them to kind of see that too side of like, hey, you know what, I messed up. It's okay, we're gonna move on. Like, and we'll do a better job tomorrow. I think that's also good for them, with the confidence and just all those things. Like, continuing to allow them to kind of have that idea.
Excellent. Coach, this has been great. And to wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every
Yep.
guest. So I'm going to go and start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you could share that you think others that are listening would be able to learn from?
Um, I would say it's maybe even a string of moments.
Okay.
But from my first years and for young coaches out there, new head coaches, I think it's a good thing. But I think for the most part, it was trying to not be too emotional. And I can remember the times my first year or two where I got really emotional about things of whether I got too mad about something, whether I got too whether it's high or low, but trying to kind of keep that level keel thing with it, because I can remember those first couple of years, I'd either yell at kids that I thought they did something wrong, and I look back at the film and I'm like, okay, that really wasn't that bad. Trying to get a little bit of, I was trying to be like, okay, no, I know I'm right. And, it didn't, I had to go back and apologize sometimes for that. So I think it's, trying to allow some extra things to happen. And so that string of moments where now I don't think I'm quite as emotional about it. I don't try and call too many timeouts to, fix one little thing, and trying to allow yourself to stay, even keeled. I think a lot of times it's and practices too. I think because the kids are going through different things. They got classes, they got all these things going on, and trying to stay that way. I think you become a little bit more human that way. Not that humans aren't emotional, but trying to stay in a even keeled state of mind, because then you can make some better decisions, and not necessarily more informed, but a little bit more rational decisions. And that also allows you to, continue to encourage kids that are doing the right things, but it also doesn't allow you to get where you're mad at or yelling at kids that you thought were doing the wrong things. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, it really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, so I think it's just a string of moments where from then to now, it's helped me with officials, it's helped me with my own players, in timeouts. I'm way more, I'm not saying because I did just yell at them a timeout the other day, but like
process. Yeah.
I'm way more able to process what needs to happen. So our timeouts tend to be a lot more efficient and a lot more actual information than it is, being mad and losing my mind because of whatever. So I think all of those things, like just being able to try and stay even keel and not get too emotional, I think has been something that hopefully others can learn from me on that one.
Yeah. It's and as you kind of mentioned, right? It's a process. It's not it's a journey, right? To
Yes.
get there, right? It's an emotionally
Yes.
charged game, so we can't always can't take it all out. We can't be robotic, right? But
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
I think the living and dying with every moment, which I know I've been guilty of in the
Yep.
past. I think learn to manage that roller coaster. It really helps keep your team level too when you're a
Yeah.
lot more level. Still something I know I'm not perfect at, but even I can say I've come a long way. So
Well,
uh,
and when they start to panic, and then they see you start to panic,
that's all
all of a
over.
sudden, then it's a runaway train. And I think a lot of times, like even then, it's just okay, relax, you're fine. Like, and you got to be able to play the next play because there's for us 40 minutes. So if you made a turnover, you just got to get back. I like get back, shake it. We use the Ted Lasso, like the goldfish idea. And I think just being able to stay level with that, like,
Yeah,
allows you to kind of handle those situations better.
I like that a lot. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, but don't worry, I'm not going to time you, so you are free to go as long as you wish. But it's a platform for you to kind of get out like a final message, a closing thought, a final idea, anything that you want to leave the listeners with, and you're welcome to take it in any direction that you wish. So, Coach, I'm just going to open up the floor to you, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know as a coach, that's a lot of freedom you're giving.
I know I am. I'm taking a
No,
risk.
no idea where I'm going to go. No, I think for me, a big, something that I've always been passionate about is, when coaches are working with kids and, coaching them throughout especially the younger ages. As much as I'm talking about playing and playing and playing because they need to do that, I think there's so many times, and today, not to be super critical, but there's a lot of kids that skill work's not quite up to par, and I think you got to be, while we need to be intentional about seeing all the options and giving them the tools. We've got to continue to do that on all the things that ball handling is not fun. I can remember it wasn't fun, but you got to be able to do it. And as you continue to grow and get to a higher level as a player, your coaches are going to expect more of you. And I think by setting them up to be successful, you got to continue to rep all of the things. So whether it's ball handling, whether it's shooting, form shooting, the defensive side of things, like giving them opportunities to do those things, like it's got to be a well-rounded game. So I don't want to see a post get stuck in there and never have handled the ball. Well, they're just limiting what they can do. I don't want to see the real big kid in the 7th grade that just gets stuck as a post that then doesn't grow all of a sudden. I think everybody needs to have a well-rounded skill set. It helps me, especially what we run, but I think coaches at every level, players at every level, you gotta do it all. As much as you may not want to, you gotta try and cover everything. It's hard, but when you do that, your players benefit more, you benefit more as a coach, and I think that's something every level can benefit from.
Yeah. Don't neglect developing those players, and it's sometimes not the flashiest thing in the world sometimes, right? Working on ball handling or some of these skills, but man, it's they players got to have them, and everything builds off that. So
Yeah,
really good point that you brought up, Coach.
We do some two ball dribbling at the beginning of practice.
I just did that yesterday.
and I'll tell you what, some of them that have really struggled with it, I just kind of go like, wow, what I was doing this for years. Like, where you been at? But I think it's one of those, like, you got to test them a little bit too. Give them different stuff, make it interesting, but try and cover as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Coach Giesler, I really want to thank you for coming on, especially I know how busy things have been and right in the middle in the thick of things with your season. But I really appreciate you sharing some insight and some ideas about working with players, talking about freedom, decision making, basketball IQ, practice planning, whole lot of really fun stuff. And I'm excited with the great start that you had at the beginning of the season, and I wish you all the best as the rest of the season continues, Coach. Thank you so much again for coming on. And
thanks for having me. And if I can be of any help, anybody's free to reach out, and I'll try and help as much as I can.
Appreciate that, Coach. You're going to have some people blowing you up, I think. So you said it, so be ready.
That's okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.